Trapped in a penthouse. Many years ago, my friends and I were dumb, new 21-year-olds, just barely navigating the bar scene in Philly, where we went to college. We hadn't had many weird interactions, save for the occasional creep who would hit on us, even when we tried to tell him to get lost. But in July of that summer, we were really enjoying the outdoor cocktails at a bar in Old City when a girl came by. She was around our age, early 20s, with a cool haircut and an outfit I loved. She looked very cool. I don't know how else to put it. She looked like someone worth hanging out with. I was smoking at the time, and she asked me for a cigarette and talked to my friend and me for a little bit, just bitching about boys and work and stuff. My friend and I were kinda desperate for friends, because all of ours had left the city for the summertime, so we were glad to have someone our age to talk to. Finally, after we get to know each other a bit, the girl asks my friend will call my friend Amy and me to come to her apartment. She says they're holding a party that evening, then she heads off. Amy and I think, why the hell not? We're bumming around the city that evening with nothing to do. We might as well try to make some friends. In my mature age now, I realize that is dumb as hell. Don't follow a girl who you just met over a cigarette to another location. A couple hours later, we were really bored and decided to head to the address this girl gave us. Only when we got there, we realized it was a penthouse on the river. The girl had given me her phone number, and I texted her saying we were there. At this point, Amy was a little wary. We both thought it was gonna be some 20-something apartment, not a penthouse. This girl comes out of the elevator, followed by a man in maybe his 40s or late 30s at least. I didn't expect that. But Amy and I were both trying to be polite, so we followed them into the elevator. During the ride up, the girl told us she was a dancer. I immediately saw that as a code for stripper, but who the hell am I to judge, I thought. So what if she's a stripper? I chided myself for not making the connection. When we get to the top, around the 14th floor, the elevator opens into an apartment, not a hallway, straight into an apartment. The apartment was honestly gorgeous. All marble, TV mounted into the wall, huge rug, etc. We stepped inside, and Amy and I felt immediately nervous. There were 3 other men there, clearly in their 40s. We, again, felt like we had to be polite, though this wasn't at all what we were expecting. The girl ran off into another room and disappeared, while Amy and I made our way into the kitchen. One of the 40-year-olds grinned at us in a terrible, creepy way and pulled one of the many bottles of wine he had from a wine rack and poured us each a glass. While he was doing this and chatting with us, the other 3 men circled around us staring. Amy and I were pretty freaked out at that point, and Amy started to say that we were late for our friend's house party. We got up to leave, but one of the men grabbed my arm telling us, "You're not allowed to leave." Needless to say, that freaked us out even more. Amy and I sat back down and planned our next move by texting each other under the counter, saying, "How do we get out of here?" Around that time, the girl we'd met ran back into the kitchen, completely fucking naked. One of the guys grabbed her, and the 2 of them ran back into a room together, leaving the 3 men circling Amy and me. I was stressed out, so I decided to have a cigarette. There was a guy who had been really focused on me, that when I went out to the balcony, he followed. I smoked a cigarette, trying to ignore him, despite the fact that it was a tiny balcony, and he was staring at me the whole time. Finally, he came up and started rubbing against me. I pushed him off and went to the other corner of the balcony. It was pouring rain at this point, and I was worried about Amy, so I told the guy that we both had to leave. "No, you're not allowed to leave. You have to stay. We're just getting started," he told me. That was one of the last straws. I tossed my cigarette into the rain and pushed open the sliding glass door. I grabbed Amy by the wrist and yelled, "We're late for a friend's party," and pushed the elevator button. Miraculously, the elevator hadn't moved in the time that we'd been up in the penthouse. Amy and I ran inside and pressed the closed door button repeatedly, watching as the men who had followed me to the balcony charged after us, trying to catch us before the door closed. Thank God he didn't. The door closed just before he reached us, and we went downstairs, finally spilling out onto the lobby. I turned around and saw by the lights and numbers above the door that the elevator was going back up to floor 14. Amy and I bolted, terrified that one of the guys would follow us down and try to catch us. We ran into the rain and booked it down several blocks before we finally stopped. To this day, we're both freaked out by that encounter. I still think it was too pushy, They wouldn't let us leave after multiple times that we told them we had to get out of there. Amy agrees with me and has since told me that when I was on the balcony, another man inside told her that she wasn't allowed to leave either. I know that's freaky enough, but hell, it was freaky for me. Fucked up angry guy followed me home from work. This happened a couple days ago. For reference, I'm a 17-year-old female in Australia, and I live a half-hour drive out of town. It was about 10:30 p.m., and I just finished work. I was on the close shift, and it was a Tuesday night, so naturally it was dead and nobody was around. I was driving home alone, and I was stuck between this 4WD UTE thing. Not good with cars, sorry. I need to get in the next lane. He was indicating, but wasn't actually going anywhere, so I indicated and overtook him into the next lane over. As I was level with him, he began veering towards me, and all I could think was how much it was going to cost to fix that, so I slammed my hand on the horn and made a what the fuck bro gesture as I passed him. In an awkward coincidence, the lights turned red and we stopped side by side. He motioned for me to wind the window down and I obliged. I was about to apologize, but I didn't even get a word out before he started screaming at me. He called me a cunt, a fucking bitch, and a stupid fucking platter mongrel, and then threatened to ram into my ass on the motorway. I was tired, it was late, and I couldn't be bothered with him. So I just rolled my eyes at him and wound the window back up while he was talking. That royally pissed him off. He turned bright red and I saw him reach down and the UTE door opened. I panicked and floated through the red light onto the motorway. I thought I was alright for a second, but I saw him in my mirror speeding up behind me. He was clearly speeding to catch up to me since I was going like 10 k's over the limit. He had his high beams on and kept flashing them. He was right up behind me and I could only think about what he'd said about crashing into me, so I tried to go a little faster. I was looking for his number plates in the mirror so I could report him, but either the lights were too bright for me to see or there was nothing there at all, and there was no way in hell I was going to stop after that performance before. I finally got off the motorway. He was still behind me and I was a little paranoid that he was following me, even though the motorway really only led to the one area. It could have still been a coincidence. So I pulled into the nearest streets and he was still behind me, so I promptly did a U-turn, and when the guy did it as well, I realized he was absolutely following me. I was about 20 minutes away from home at this point, and I didn't want to lead him anywhere near my house. So I decided on a split-second decision to go to the nearest police station to hopefully get him off my ass. Unfortunately, the nearest police station closed at 9:30, and I only ended up pulling into a dark, empty car park. I pulled over facing the entrance, so I could see if he had followed me. I didn't see him coming in, thankfully, and I figured he chickened out once he saw the police station. I debated calling the cops, since I didn't think I was in any danger anymore. That was until I noticed out of the corner of my eye a stern white UTE slowly creeping up on my left, with its lights off. Once again, I panicked and floored it out of the car park and back towards the main road. I had no idea where I was going, no intention to pull over, and no clue who to call. I was going in the complete opposite direction of my house. I eventually spotted a nice, brightly lit petrol station and pulled into there, parking as close to the doors as I possibly could. I jumped out, frantically waved my arms around at the doors. When I was let in, I started screaming at the poor lady at the register to lock the doors and that someone was following me. I was absolutely terrified, but thankfully, she was quick on the uptake and locked the doors. I realized I left my phone in the car, but she offered to call the police. I was keeping an eye on the road outside while the clerk called the cops. I absolutely saw that car drive past, but he didn't come in. The clerk waited with me for the cops to show it up, and eventually they did. It was almost 11 by the time they got there. I had literally never been happier to see a cop car in my whole entire life. They asked me to describe the guy and the UTE and asked for the registration. I gave them what I could, and one of them drove me home. I haven't heard any follow-ups from anyone, but it was absolutely terrifying. Enough so that I had to be taken off night shifts for a little while, to be honest. I only been driving for a little under a year, but honestly, I don't think anything is gonna top that experience. If people are interested, I'll definitely update if I hear anything about the guy. Being stalked for 16 years is enough. This is probably going to be a long read, so please bear with me as this story has a lot of details. The reason I wanted to share my experience is because I know a lot of people have at one time or another in their lives dealt with someone who was either super creepy or that person began to stalk them, so here goes. Here's a short history of how this all began. When I was about 16 years old, my mother told me a friend of hers needed a babysitter, and I was more than willing to take the job because I could always use the extra cash. I have a very close relationship with my mother, so I had complete trust in this friend of hers, since my mother doesn't just trust anyone. So I began to babysit for her 10 and 7-year-old daughters. The oldest had a major attitude, but after I became their regular sitter, she wasn't as difficult to deal with. If you're curious as to why I'm sharing this, it's a vital detail to the story. Let's fast forward several years. I'm about 19 years of age now. I know this because I graduated high school the year before. This was a major deal in my life, so it's all very vivid in my mind. I hadn't babysitted for this family for about 2 years by this time. I was pretty busy with going to college, working my part-time job, and spending time with my family and close friends. One day my mother approaches me and asked if I was willing to befriend a girl that her parents felt needed socialization. She gave me a few details before I decided on what to do. She told me that the girl that she wanted me to befriend was one of the girls that I used to sit for. I asked her who she was referring to, because I sat for several families when I was a full-time sitter. She told me who it was. I was slightly hesitant because of the attitude she had when I first met her, but I was always open to helping other people in any way in that I could. I began to get together with her every once in a while. I would invite her to small gatherings with some of my other friends, but only if there were other younger ones with us, like their little sisters or something like that. I was always in groups of people of various ages, usually around the age of 13 plus, and always with both guys and girls as well. My older friends and I were sort of the big sisters of the group, so that's why we were always happy to have those type of get-togethers. She slowly opened up to me. She began to share with me that she was dealing with depression, and often felt that she was unloved by her family and friends. She also told me that she had contemplated suicide and was cutting herself. Well, the reason I took her more than the other younger ones is because I had dealt with those exact same issues and thoughts and feelings when I was around her age as well. So I wanted to try to do my best to give her a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. I would give her some advice, anything that I thought would benefit her. Once she felt that she could trust me, I tried to broaden her horizons, but things slowly would take a strange, and eventually a sinister turn. Now, when I would try to invite her to her usual get-togethers or social events, she seemed very standoffish. I was a little surprised, but not too much, because I knew how difficult things were for her, and it did take her some time to warm up to people. Eventually, she began to try and drag me along with her when she had one of her I don't want to be here attitudes. For example, we would go to the house of another friend of mine. There would be maybe 6 to 8 of us total, and we would watch movies or do something else. This was before the days of social media, and the everyone has a cell phone era. She seemed to want to go, but as soon as we got to wherever it was that we were, she wanted to leave. She would pull me aside and say, "I don't want to be here, let's go." Well, I at first was kind and would tell her, "Come on, let's just stay for a little while, and if you don't want to stay, we'll leave." I soon learned that she didn't want to stay, even if we were all having a great time together. Eventually, she kept pulling me aside whenever we were in a group settings, so I just eventually stopped inviting her altogether, because all she wanted to do was leave the moment we got there, no matter what the circumstances were and what we were doing. I mention this because it's another vital part of the story. I would just spend time with her once in a while, just her and I. She began to call me on a daily basis. It started with 2 to 3 times a day, and eventually it got up to 7 to 10 times every single day. As I said before, this time in my life, I was always extremely busy, so I wasn't always home. I had my own telephone landline because I was able to pay for it myself. I had an answering machine, not voicemail, because I was too cheap to pay for a feature I didn't need. Anyways, I would have to change the tapes way too often because of how much she would call me and leave message after message. She would leave messages like, "Where are you? Why aren't you answering my phone calls? Who are you with?" That was just a little too weird for me. Even when I told her I wasn't always home until late in the evening or nighttime, and all she had to do was leave one message. As soon as I was home, I returned all the messages I had for the day. That did not deter her from continuing to do this, day after day. I began to get really annoyed, but stupid me didn't listen to my gut instincts. I kept telling myself, she just needs a friend. It's not her fault. Boy, would I soon learn that that was just not the case. Eventually, I kind of just drifted away from her for a bit. Not intentionally, just because things in life seemed to speed up, and I was even busier than before. I would have a very few times that I could get together with a friend or two, possibly going out to eat, shopping at the mall, or maybe seeing a movie even. Out of nowhere, she began showing up wherever I was, and no, I didn't tell her where I was going or who I was with. Like I said, I had pretty much drifted away from spending time with her. We lived in a pretty big suburb, and it's not like it would have been easy for her to know where to find me. I began to get really creeped out because I thought it was way too coincidental that she knew everywhere I was when I would be doing anything recreational. She even found out where I worked and what college I was going to, something that I never even told her. She was obviously not college aged, so why she was at my college campus with her mother? She wasn't even in high school yet. This is not even the creepiest part. Yes, there's more to this story. When I was on break from college, I had the time to spend with family and close friends. I did get together with her a couple times, still not listening to the creep meter I had going off. I was so stupid. Well, things took an even more weird and unexplainable turn. She would ask to spend the night, and I didn't really do sleepovers anymore since I was of age and pretty much leading my own life. But she was still young, so I would invite her once in a while to stay over. Somehow, and I have no memory of how this happened, but she wouldn't leave. It's like she slept over one night and then just never left. Trust me, there was definitely not an open invitation for her to stay long term. I had told her that she couldn't stay with me because she had her own life and so did I. She got very angry with me and for several days refused to leave. Thankfully, I was still living at home, and my mom had to step in and pretty much tell her bluntly to get out. She had a little tantrum that night, but she did end up leaving. By this time, I had been totally fed up with her irrational and erratic behavior. I was avoiding her like the plague. I didn't call her back. If she was somewhere I would duck into hiding, so to speak, and try to lose her in the crowd. That didn't stop her from increasing her strange behavior. Her family even did some things that I feel sort of helped her stalk me more. Now, this is not something I am making up. This actually happened to me. She moved to a street around the corner from where I lived. Now that's not the scary part. Her and her family moved into a house, which from her living room window, you could see directly into our backyard, and from there, you could see the window to my bedroom. Yes, that happened. I only know this because I found out where she had moved, and my mom was still friends with her mother, so I remember going over there once when she wasn't home, and when I looked out their living room window, I could see our house. My bedroom window from our backyard. We had a chain link fence so you could see everything. I got the chills when I saw that. When we got home, I informed my mother, who was so busy socializing that she didn't even notice. That's when my mother tried to talk to her mom and tell her about the situation. Her parents both just ignored my mother's warnings. My mom tried to ask them to talk to her about backing off. Well, that didn't happen. Things just escalated from there. Her mom even tried to convince me to stay friends with her. and wanted to pretty much pawn her daughter off of me. I don't even remember what she said to try and convince me. I just remember saying to myself, okay lady, you're just as nuts as your daughter. It wasn't long before the most sinister and disturbing part happened. This was the last straw. I was home alone one day. She was still living in the stalker house. This had to be how she knew I was the only one home at the time. I wasn't talking to her. I'd even changed my phone number and told my friends to absolutely not give it to her, which they respected and happily obliged. Anyways, as I said, I was home alone. It was maybe about 10 a.m., and I was just getting up to take a shower and get ready to start my day. As soon as I was getting out of the shower, I hear the doorbell ring. I think nothing of it and go to answer the door. I always look through the peephole before I answer the door, something I still do to this day. I see several police officers standing there. I got a sick feeling in the pit of my stomach, thinking something had happened to one of my family members. I answer the door and they ask, "Are you B?" I answered, "No, she doesn't live here. B is my stalker's name." The officer then says, "Do you have any identification with you?" Which I answered, "Of course, but it's in the back of the house. I have to go and get it." Now, mind you, I am totally confused as to why they are at my door and why they're asking me for my ID. The officer then proceeds to tell me that he has to come with me when I go into the back of the house. I just nodded in agreement, but still confused as to what in the world was going on. So we go into my bedroom, I grab my ID, and I show the officer who I am. He just says, "Okay, thank you. May we sit down for a moment and talk to you?" I of course agreed, and motioned him back into the living room, where the other officers had joined us. We sit down, and they tell me they received an anonymous phone call that there was a young lady that lived at my address by the name of B that was extremely suicidal and may have already taken her life. I just sat there for a moment in complete shock. I told them that she used to be a friend of mine, but that I hadn't talked to her in quite a while, but that she absolutely did not live here. They asked me if I had any contact information for where she was. Thankfully, I still had her info on hand. I then give them her contact information, telephone number, and home address. They thanked me for my time and left. I thought that was the end of it. Not by a long shot. I apologize for the length, but this is all important for me to get out. After they leave, I called my mother immediately. She proceeded to tell me to come to her workplace until I had to go to my classes for the day. I hightailed it and drove to her office. Since she owned a business, it was no problem for me to stay there for a few hours. I stayed there until I had to go to class, and then went on with the rest of my day, although I was still shaken up a little bit. The rest of the story is from third-party perspective. All of my close friends knew about the situation by this time because her behavior was way too psychotic for me, and I was going to do whatever I needed to do so I would be safe. I believe a few friends of mine and myself were at a coffee shop, one of the internet cafes from back in the day, and we're talking when another mutual friend walks in and comes right up to us, looks at me and says, "I have to tell you something." I was like, okay, shoot. Apparently, a few days before, they had run into B, and they said she looked eerily exactly like me. My jaw dropped and I asked, "What do you mean?" We in no way look similar, in no way, shape, or form. I mean, it wasn't like you would confuse one of us for the other or something like that. Well, she had apparently began to dress very much like me, dyed and styled her hair like mine, wore the same kind of bracelets I would wear. I had a bit of a thing for friendship bracelets back then, etc., and just looked exactly like me. I was shocked to my very, very core. I've been on the phone with a couple friends of mine. I had a three-way calling feature where you could call two people at once and all talk to one another. One of my friends on the line had informed me that they had heard about why the suicidal report incident occurred. Mind you, this is a few months after the fact. She had heard from another reliable and trustworthy friend of ours that the reason there was that call, this is going to blow your mind, is because B had called anonymously saying that a young lady by that name lived at my home and was suicidal. That's not the craziest part. The reason she did it is because she wanted the police to think that I was her, so that they would take me away to a psychiatric ward. Therefore, she could take over my life. How super crazy could she be? I don't know how she thought that my family and friends would just fucking allow her to do that, but this is how mentally unstable she really was. Now, the timing was perfect for me. I only say that because I was getting ready to move away from the area because I was starting a new job and life had basically taken me in towards that direction. My family was moving away with me for obvious reasons, so we in fact did move away. It was the best thing to ever happen to me because she just got worse and worse over time. She began to harass my close friends, trying to get my whereabouts, like my address, my phone number, where I had moved away to. They didn't give her my information since they knew how psychotic she was. At one point, she even began to stalk the brother of one of my very close guy friends, just so she could try to intimidate him, to tell her where I was. He had to have his grandparents step in because he wasn't of age yet. I have no idea what happened to that situation from there, since I had moved away by then, and the internet wasn't like it is today. Now let's fast forward to 2012. Mind you, the stalking began around the year 2000. Obviously, since it's 2012, social media is a big thing, and of course I had a Facebook account. I didn't even think of my privacy because to me, all of that was long behind me, and I had eventually forgotten about me. One day, I go to sign on and take a wild guess as to who tried to friend me on Facebook. My heart sank for a second. Then the first thing I did was delete her request and block her fast. Thinking I had taken care of the eerie online encounter, I was wrong yet again. She began to have her friends message me, asking me why I didn't accept her request. Why did I block her? Blah blah blah. I blocked each and every person that contacted me, until the messages just stopped eventually. Not quite to the end yet. Sorry everyone, I really didn't want it to be this long, but this is just how the story goes. The last run-in I had with her online was when she tried to contact me through every single social media account I had. Twitter, Instagram, etc. I blocked her, of course. She then proceeded to try and make fake accounts using my photo and name. I thought, okay, little Miss Crazy, I'll fix your fanny. As you must know, by now I am way more assertive and didn't take any kind of craziness from anyone. I had all the fake accounts closed by reporting them to all the social media outlets themselves, but not before getting as much information as I could about the whole situation, reporting her to the proper authorities. Thankfully, I had documented everything that happened in the past and kept it all stored away. What can I say? I'm a pack rat. Once I got the reports out, the contacts stopped. I also changed my name that I use on every social media account that I have. Instead of using my legal name, I use an alias instead. This is one thing she does not know about me. No one except for my immediate family knows this little fact. I also put everything on super private and have set some super high security measures. Now one last fast forward. May 2016. I turn my phone on like I do every morning, and after my phone loads up it says no service. I just knew there had to be a mistake, so I called the phone company, asked them why my phone had no service since I had just paid my bill. They looked on their system and proceeded to tell me that in their notes, they received a phone call a few hours earlier that morning from a young lady. They assumed it was me, I guess, and she said that she had a new number and that the number needed to be transferred to this new phone. When they told her that the name didn't match on the account, somehow, and I have no idea how, she got them to change the name on my account from my name to hers. I have no idea what she wanted to accomplish by doing this, and even worse, how in the hell she got my number. I explained that this person was a longtime stalker, that I had reports to the police, and that I have to be protected against her because she is capable of anything. So they asked me to go into their corporate office so they could change everything back to its original state, as well as put some security measures on the account so that this would never happen again. Now, since then, so far, I haven't had any more incidences. I'm absolutely on high alert because she's willing to wait 16 years and still wants to find me for whatever reason. There is no way in hell I'm going to let my guard down. The only reason I didn't file a restraining order is because, as far as I know, she does not know where I live, and I want to keep it that way. However, if she thinks that, I won't ever file one. If she does find me, she's got another thing coming. So B, let's not ever meet again.